of that group of humanity that is not really interested about being human. And the evidence around us, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, is more or less identical and very common. If we look at just the odd liberation armies, wherever they are, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims, is immaterial, then you find that almost every army that you come across in any part of the world ends up raping the woman, raping little children, killing old people, destroying infrastructure. That's common, and it's not a non-Muslim thing. It's inclusive of Muslim armies and Muslim soldiers. Whatever excuses that they might use to justify those things, oh, we are Muslims so we can take prisoners of war and we can enslave them, and we must be very careful. The Sharia has not been created to play around with. And the Sharia is the Quran using the word Sharia. Sharia is not a word, man-made word. It's a Quranic verse that talks about it, that we have set out everything in the Sharia. And it is totally complete, because there are two aspects that Almighty Allah has set out for us to understand. Starting with the fact when the verse says that we will preserve and look after a revelation, we generally narrow it down just to the Quran. It's not the book, it's the whole system that is being preserved by Almighty Allah. If the book is preserved, cover to cover, in the printed form, then is that preservation, or is the carrying out of all the rules that are mentioned in the Quran? That is preservation. So if we have the book and it's in all the shelves of the masjids and at home, and we do recite it and everything, but if we're not implementing the rules, then we don't fall under the hifaza, the protection that the Quran and its teachings has. Then we as individuals are out of it. And the only reason for this is that, unlike any other organization or nation or any other religion, the only faith that has everything preserved that we have to do in pristine purity and accurately, then it is only Islam. No other religion has it. And they will not have it because they have changed the Bible. It's not the same Bible that was revealed. It's not the same Torah that was revealed. It's all changed. It's only the Quran and what we are required to practice in it. At the same time, as part of that preservation of the teachings of Islam, Almighty Allah has set a system, because there is no more Nabis going to come after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We know from previous talks and our readings and all that there will always be reformers. We talk of every century there's a reformer. We talk of, in the same tone, of Mujaddid al-Kasani, rahmatullahi alayh, and from the time of Rasulullah, there's always been that cycle of individuals that come up. We don't have to worry if it's every century or every 10 years or every 50 years or every 200 years. That's not the issue. The issue is there will always be very high caliber reformers emerging from time to time. And in every country, in every way that there are Muslims, such people will emerge, and they can also emerge sometimes in non-Muslim countries. And there are examples of that too. Kashmir was a country of 100% non-Muslims. One Muslim alim and scholar goes to Kashmir, and Kashmir becomes a Muslim state. And there are many other such instances. Where did the Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia become Muslim from? It was through those individuals. We sometimes, not knowing, because we're not a nation and ummah anymore that does research and does study, we assume that probably from the Arab world, through India, through Pakistan, whatever the territories were called at that time, it reached Southeast Asia. Geographically, that would seem. But the first part of the world that Islam went out of the Arab world was actually in China. And how did it go? There was no trains and aeroplanes. There were those odd, old kind of boats. It actually went overland. And if you go to China and you go and study, there's one or two very old masajid, and there are some kind of evidence that one or two companions may have been there. So we need to know the context of it. But besides those high-powered reformers, one of the ways that Muslim society is preserved is that there will always be a few ordinary Muslims. A few ordinary Muslims in the sense that they don't stand out as great mufassirs and muhaddiseen, but these qualities that I'm going to mention now do exist in these great reformers and scholars. But an ordinary Muslim can also have certain qualities which the Quran describes that makes him a committed Muslim. And we'll very quickly and briefly look at some of those qualities. We all know from the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa ibadur Rahman. Here there's a description of an ordinary believing Muslim, and look at how the Quran, it is definitely divine. Verses like this makes you accept that it's not human. It can only be divine. And the description of an ordinary good Muslim is wa ibadur Rahman allazina yamshuna ala al-ardi hawna. The first description, among other descriptions, is that a good Muslim is he who is a slave, Ibadur Rahman, slaves of Almighty Allah, who walk softly on earth. That's what the Quran is saying. It doesn't say he has a long beard and a long kurta and a long tasbih with 1,000 beads. It doesn't say that. All it says is the quality of a good believing Muslim. One of the key qualities, they walk softly. They are slightly bent, as the Sunnah is. They don't walk like that. Nothing of that kind. Total humility. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. They don't get into serious discussions, shouting and proving this and all that. When they deal with the ignorant, they say, Salama, peace, peace. And they walk on and they do their good. They don't get involved. That's the first description of being an ordinary good Muslim. The next description, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَنفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا. The ordinary good Muslim is a person who, when he spends, does not go overboard. He remains within his limits. And the verse goes on to say, and they are not miserly also. They spend, but they also are not miserly. They are بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ قَوَامًا. They keep a total balance in their spending. And that is not saying it's the rich man. The verse is not saying it's the poor man. It doesn't say it's the middle class man. Because when it comes to Iman and who's a good Muslim, those categories don't apply. Poverty and wealth don't apply here. It's your character that applies. So if you have 20 cents, you spend it exactly like this verse says. You use it a little for myself, my family, and a little for charity. If you have 200 million, the same system applies. Nothing changes. The poor man will give from his 20 cents, 5 cents for this, and 2 cents for that, and 3 cents for that. The millionaire will give in the millions, the billionaire will give in billions, but the system doesn't change. The teaching doesn't change. You apply the same rule, and it doesn't give the beggar the permission to opt for begging as the first option. That goes against tawakkul. It goes against other teachings. And then, what is that real quality of these ordinary human beings? وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ. And this is what makes one a Muslim. You never associate anybody with Almighty Allah under any circumstances. And this is not, as we say, oh, the Hindus is idols. This is not referring, it is referring to that, but it's going well beyond that. It's not about idol worship, that's visible. It's the idol that you create within yourself. That you create within yourself when you give preferences to other things that become a form of shirk. Shirk is not just a statue in front or something. Shirk is in your whole approach to life. Shirk can be so many things. Anything that takes your mind and concentration and your iman away in any way from Almighty Allah, in a minor or a big way or a small way, that becomes shirk. The moment your attention is diverted from Allah, there's an element of shirk. So it's that quality of shirk that is mentioned here. And then these verses of this nature go on. When it comes to the family, these people are, this idea, I'm in the path of Allah. Allah will look after my family. There's a context to it. But you're still responsible. You're still responsible. You can't leave your wife and children at home, or your parents, or wherever, and say, Allah will look after them, I'm on the path of Allah. Nobody teaches you to do that. No Jamaat teaches you to do that. It's your own wrong assumption. You are not taught to do that. You have to provide for them within your capacity, whichever way. And these people are so aware of this responsibility. So what do? Rabbana hab lana min azwajina wa zurriyatina. They lift up their hands and they say to Almighty Allah, grant us, gift us with companions, with husbands and wives, and family and children that give us qurrata ayun, coolness of the eye. Now the same thing is mentioned in Salah. Salah is to be coolness of the eye. So you can see the waiting here. When you worship Allah sincerely and put that head down on the mat or wherever, then that Salah in itself should give you. But there's a very important usage, that's why knowing Arabic is so important. Qurrata ayni, the preposition used here doesn't say fi salat. Coolness of the eye is not in Salah. The coolness of the eye in the fact that you realize, as the hadith says, that I am in the presence of Allah. That presence of Allah is the coolness. If the Salah is giving you coolness, then that's a very, very subtle shirk involved there. Because now you're making Salah a little bigger than Almighty Allah. It's not Allah that's giving you the coolness. You think the Salah is giving you. So it's that becomes now refining your Salah. In the beginning, that can be the way you get into it. But that's not the objective. The Salah that gives you coolness of the eye is when you are conscious of that verse, that hadith, if you, in prayer, you need to imagine, or in reality, it starts with imagination, it must become a reality that you are seeing Almighty Allah. That is what he said first, that you are seeing Almighty Allah. And the second level is that if you can't reach that, it's not possible, we are ordinary human beings, then at least imagine that Almighty, or think or ponder over the fact that Allah is looking at you. That's the second level. And that is what gives you the coolness of the eye. Not just saying Allah and you're thinking of cricket match at Newlands. The first thing I want to know when I walk out of the mandir, what's the score? That's not the way you get coolness of the eye. When you make that iqamah and when you make that takbir, your mind is totally engrossed in Almighty Allah, 100%. That is the coolness of the eye. And that is the quality of the good ordinary Muslim. Muslim. And the Quran goes on to say about these wonderful Muslims, the ordinary one. We're not going to talk of the high-powered, pious ulama and so on. They have to be there, that's also guaranteed. But the other aspect in our dealings, we are told, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ijtanibu kaseeran min az-zann. Stop speculating and thinking about people. No evidence, nothing. You see that man and you say, hey, something is not right about him, and you start speculating. Or you see him talking without any break in modesty. He's talking to a lady decently, properly. She's in hijab and he's talking to her, and you start speculating. Wait, what's happening here? You're not allowed to do that. You are not allowed to speculate that kind. And this is what the Quran is. You've got no right to think anything wrong of another human being, leave alone another Muslim. You're not allowed that. So that's it. Wala tajassasu. Don't go around spying and finding out. And that is why on this particular verse I tell my friends, a lot of businesses, they want to find out from the credit bureau what's the standing of Bashir Bhai. Do I give him a loan or not? It's haram. I'm saying it. Some ulama may say I'm out of line. I accept it. But in my understanding from this verse, what are you doing? It's tajassus. You are spying on another man's bank balance. You're asking somebody to reveal his status. You're not allowed to do that. You look at the man, if he qualifies in terms of Islamic law and Islamic understanding, he qualifies for zakah, or whatever charity you want to give him, or whatever bursary, or whatever you can't go on spying. And then, of course, backbiting. And backbiting, I've said many times here, is not to do with the truth. Too many of us assume that if somebody is doing wrong and there is evidence of the wrong, so it gives me the freedom to talk about it. It does not give you the freedom to talk about it. The only allowance is that if you want to help that human being to reform, then you deal with it. You go to the imam, or you go to the parent of the person, or his brothers, his uncles, whoever that could influence him to leave a bad habit and become a better human being. That's the only time you talk about it. And this is not talking about untruth. It's talking about what is true. Not untruths. Because untruths, that is too major a sin. That's blasphemy. That's kufr actually. When you make up stories on lies and accuse people of it. That borders on kufr. I'm not saying you're a kafir, I've got no right to give that kind of ruling, but it borders on that. So this is not even talking of that. This is talking about true things, valid things. You don't talk about it. Because like plastic is polluting the world, this kind of talk pollutes the atmosphere. Everything in this world works with waves. And that's the science teachers should be dealing with that. But there are spiritual waves as well. When the Quran says that the world is held up by pillars, surely there are no visible pillars between the planets and the sun and the moon. But there are invisible pillars. And those pillars, whether it's magnetic or whatever, science will tell us that. That's their field. But the whole world is upheld, similar to pillars upholding this roof and this structure. It is there. So it's not everything. 90% of the world is invisible. We don't see. We only see 10%, and we want to be professors and become Hawkins. Now that he's gone, the whole world is praising him. But a few months ago he said there is no God. So everything that he says, as far as I'm concerned, is useless. He's not a believer of any kind. With his kind of mind that Almighty gave him, the least he could have done is to affirm that there is a creator. But he didn't. But we go on praising him and admiring him. Then we are told, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la yaskhar. This comedy thing that has crept in our society. Nothing wrong with comedy, clean humor. But when you use individuals, like in Afrikaans, the van der Merwe stories, Islamically that's wrong. Or you go to India and they talk about 12 o'clock, the Sikhs go off their head. Those who have been to India will understand what I'm saying. You don't do that. Muslims are not allowed to label people in terms of mockery of any kind. We're not allowed. The Quran is saying so. It's not a hadith, or it's not a saying of another saintly person. It is, the Quran says, don't mock at people. Don't make jokes about other human beings. And it's not again saying Muslims. It uses the word qawm. It means humanity at large. And there's a particular reference in the same verse, وَلَا نِسَاءٌ مِن نِسَاءٍ. And this particular reference that ladies must be even more careful. It seems that for whatever reason, the Quran is alerting us to it, that maybe because ladies compete in beauty or whatever, I don't know these things, but the Quran makes a special mention that ladies in particular should be careful when they talk of other ladies. Because, and the reason for all this, not talking of أَيّْكُنْ خَيْرًا مِنْ, they might be better than you. I may be making 5 times salah. But that person, on the basis of the hadith, that keeps other human beings smiling all the time and gives them some sort of comfort to their souls, could go to heaven more easily, and I might not make it as a 5-time musalli, if I was making 5 times salah. Because keeping another human being's heart contented and happy is a very powerful thing with Almighty Allah. You do not hurt the hearts. So this is what we need to do. And how do they deal with other human beings? يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. These are, and this is based on an actual incident where Rasulullah ﷺ one evening announced there was a very hungry companion who just hadn't eaten for several days. He came to Rasulullah ﷺ. I may be relating the hadith slightly differently, but these stories, the hadith, the message is the correct one. And this another companion said, when Rasulullah announced, there was such poverty amongst the Muslims at that time that there was nobody at that time who could tell Rasulullah ﷺ that we got food for this man. Because there was nothing. The first thing Rasulullah did, he asked his wives, is there any food? They all said, there's nothing, leave alone to give. We haven't got for you or for us anything. So this one companion said, if nobody's putting in their hand, he said, I will take him to my house and I'll feed him. And he went to his house, took this other companion and told his wife, Rasulullah's guest is here. We have to feed him. So she said, but I haven't got food for you or myself. I've just got a little for our children. So he said, just put the water on boil and keep telling the children something's cooking until they fall asleep. And then you put the food that we have on the table. But the moment you put it on the table, just with your hand, put the lamp off, and we'll say, oh, we haven't got any more oil, whatever the situation was. And they fed this other companion, and they didn't eat at all. And this verse revealed that they give preference to another human being above them. And the next morning when he walked into the masjid, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called him and said, you've been rewarded with such enormous reward for your action last night. And the other companions, of course, asked him, what did you do? So he told them that he took this other companion. And finally, يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَىٰ جُنُوبٍ. And in the end, forget all about these things. These are human beings, ordinary human beings, who get up in the night and lift up their hands, put their heads down, and they pray to Almighty Allah at all times, sitting and on their sides. They pray all the time. That is what being a good Muslim is really all about, friends. The Sharia, in conclusion, is something that cannot be touched. This idea that we have nowadays, that there's no room. The Quran, the other verses, we won't go into details, doesn't allow us this freedom to say, I want to change. Our circumstances have changed. Too many women are now become breadwinners. So the law of miras, of inheritance, and the share of the wife needs to change, because we're living in a very civilized world. Civilized world, you're killing each other, you're murdering each other, you're raping each other. Babies are not safe. 2-month, 3-month-old babies are not safe. And you say you are civilized, and Quranic laws must be changed. Women have to work, and therefore they must get half the share, same as the brother can't get twice the amount. These are Quranic verses. It's not something that the ulama have calculated. These are Quranic verses. And we say, no, we're living in a new society. Which new society? Is there a single verse in the Quran that talks that in each century you change the Sharia laws because circumstances have changed? Is because of new circumstances modesty thrown out of the window? We don't have to be modest. Woman's freedom is nakedness. The abaya must go from Makkah and Medina. They don't have to cover themselves the way it should be. They must be modestly dressed. You tell me, how many of those Saudis will understand modesty once the abaya is thrown away? So we are not allowed to play with the Sharia. The simple explanation given this afternoon in terms of what a good Muslim is, we all can do that. We can become conscious believers, read our kalima, love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to our bits, and look at our walk, look at our way we make salah, look at our way we deal with our parents, look at the way we deal with our children, look at the basics. That's all that is required. So Jazakumullah for listening, and inshallah, as far as Islam is concerned, the whole Muslim world can go, the whole non-Muslim world can go. Islam remains ever fresh, available in its pristine purity as revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's our choice whether we want to accept the Quran and follow it or not. But the Quran is not going to disappear until just before Yawm al-Qiyamah, and that is still in many ways probably not in our lifetime. So let's decide to follow what we have to follow. Jazakumullah.
Jazakumullah khairan to Maulana for that very inspirational talk, inshallah. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, with taqwa and our youth as well, inshallah. Make the dua, Allahumma hifdhana ya Allah bit taqwa wal istiqamah.